Hi, my name's Neil at Future Skills and I'm here to show you how to make quick spaghetti bolognese. So, ingredients we're playing with: celery, carrots, onion, garlic, thyme, parsley, minced beef, mushrooms, copious amounts of wine. Could use water, could use stock, but wine's probably to your taste, I hope. Okay, let's make a start. We do first, before any cooking takes place, let's get our preparation done, whereby get all the onions chopped, etc. So, peeling onions is quite a straightforward skill. Peel the onion from the top downwards. If you do it this way, hopefully it doesn't make you cry. And for all of you who've chopped onions before and it starts to fall apart whilst you're doing it, if you do it this way, it'll save you the aggravation. So, once you've got the onion peeled, cut it in half through the root. That keeps the onion whole. Put a few cuts through the onion without going through the back of the onion. Turn it around. That'll do it. So that's the onion done. Put that onto a tray or a plate. Keep all your ingredients separate from each other, because when it comes to cooking them, we're going to have slightly different cookery times. We'll add them bit by bit. Next is your carrots. Obviously pretty straightforward. Give them a peel. It's a good idea to put carrots in with any minced beef dish, because if we cut it small enough to look like mince, it extends the mince. So we've got about 750 grams of meat here, which could equate to maybe 5-6 portions. So if we fill this up with a little bit of extra stuff like carrots and vegetables, it actually extends it, which means you can feed more, or put it in the fridge and you've got it for tomorrow and the day after. Okay. Carrots, just cut them into relatively thin strips and then cut each one again. Turn them round. Chop them. I'm not expecting you to be as fast as this, but if you can get into good habits, when I'm cooking at home, this is how I cook. It's safer, it's easier, it's less wasteful. It's just good practice to get your heads into. We've got the carrots, we've got the onion. We're going to add to it some celery, which is really already cut for us. All we have to do is cut it into strips. What I'm trying to do is make sure that all these veg cuts are all roughly the same size, so that there's no great big chunks. The biggest thing that's going to be left in the bolognese is going to be the mushrooms. This can all be done in advance, by the way. If you've got the energy, get up in the morning, do this, then when you come back in later on, it's done for you. All you have to do is cook it and assemble it. Alternatively, make it the night before, keep it in the fridge, just heat it up as you're going along. Garlic. The easiest way to do garlic is to actually break a clove off the main bulb and just crush it under the knife. Make sure the knife's not that way, obviously. Peel the skin off. Jamie Oliver will try and sell you a garlic press at about £5, but there's no point. And then try and wash them, it's a nightmare. Once you've got the skin off, it's just a case of then crushing it. Always, it's easy for me to say, but have confidence in your tool, in your knives. Have confidence that you're in control of it rather than it being in control of you. Because the minute you start getting timid about using sharp knives, you're limiting what you can do with this thing. So, in preparation: onion, carrot, celery, garlic. Mushrooms are a little bit big if I put them in comparison to the size of the other cut. So what I'm going to do is quickly cut them into quarters, and they'll wilt down. Also then, some people don't like mushrooms, so I mean, if it's there and they can see them, they can always take them out. Most chefs don't wash mushrooms. What we do is, where you see some dirt like that, just brush it off. If you start washing mushrooms before you cook them, they go all slimy and start to then have negative appearance in the dish. I reckon I've got about 50 grams of mushrooms. Okay, that ought to be enough. So, all my preparation is done now. It's just a case of building the dish up, bringing it all together, adding the different flavours and cooking it out. See you in the kitchen in a minute. Okay, so we've done the preparation. Now it's simply a case of putting the dish together. One thing I haven't done yet is mess around with these herbs, because when you're playing with herbs, you're best leaving it to the very end to get the maximum amount of flavour. If I prep them now, it'll dry out and become a bit stale. So, put a bit of a glug of olive, try and use olive oil if you can. Veg oil's just is good, but olive oil actually is tasty in its own right and enhances the dish. So, take your mince. Literally, if you can, flake it. If you start squeezing it into a ball, it's going to make it difficult to cook. So if you can hold it and string it, and then all we're doing to cook it is to chop it. You need to chop mince to make sure that you leave the grains as open as possible rather than having a big coagulated mass going on. Notice at this point I haven't added any salt and pepper. If you add salt to this now, the meat will start to weep and it will start to lose its flavour and its juices. So we're just sealing the meat first to get some nice colour to it and bring out some of the fat. Depends on how cheap your mince is, really, depends on how much fat you've got. So we're just doing it in a chopping motion. A little tip when you're buying mince, obviously depends how much money you've got. The more you pay, the better the quality. It really is a simple case of you get what you pay for. Okay, so if you have a look in the pan, you'll see that virtually all the redness has gone. Slight bit of pink, and yet the mince is all still very flaky and crumbly. To that now we need to add the strongest flavour, which is the garlic. What the garlic's going to do now is flavour the meat and the oil that's in the pan, so that then everything gets an even coating of garlic. Too many people just throw everything in at the same time, which doesn't make for a good dish. Next, add the onions. We don't need to fry them, we don't need to brown them, because you're not going to see them in the dish anyway. The wine that we're going to add is going to mask it anyway. So all we're doing is distributing the onions throughout the meat, softening them. It's a shame you can't smell this. When that's distributed, in with the carrots and in with the celery. Now, if you're making a bolognese, this is a classical bolognese sauce. Bolognese sauce is then served with pasta. So, in this country now we call it spaghetti bolognese, but you can serve bolognese with any form of pasta, and this basic sauce is exactly the same sauce that is between the sheets of lasagna. So if you can make this, have it stored in your fridge, if you're prepared to eat it with rice or with pasta, you can have 3 or 4 different meals out of it with exactly the same ingredient. So we're just letting that soften slightly before we add the next lot of ingredient, the main event. At this point now, season it. Put a little bit of salt and a little bit of, this is cracked black pepper, which is sweet. You can smell pepper without sneezing, black pepper, but white pepper, far too hot. Now, when it comes to seasoning, put enough to bring the flavours of the dish out, but don't forget that we can always taste it later and then add some more salt and pepper to taste. If we put too much in now, it's very difficult to get rid of it. It's virtually impossible to get rid of it. Okay. So if you can see inside the pan there, everything's roughly the same size, everything is now coated in all the flavours, the meat flavour, the onion, the carrot, the celery, the garlic, salt and pepper, and to that about 2 tablespoons of tomato puree. Now, that stuff burns, so what we do now is add a serious glug of wine to this. And as chefs, we work on the theory that when the wine comes to the surface of the dish, there's enough. You see what I mean? Now the wine has literally coated the surface. That grease that you can see on top there is olive oil and meat fat. So if there's too much, we'll take some of it off later when we come to serving. Now gently stir it all together. heat up. We need to cook that out now for about 10 minutes. I say 10 minutes because we've got a good quality meat. If it was a cheap meat, it actually needs more cooking because it comes from an inferior part of the animal. Don't ask me where, because nobody knows. But the cheaper the meat, the longer the cooking. Okay, so now's the time to go watch TV, chill out, do what you need to do, make a phone call, keep an eye on it, come back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so as when you start to see the pan come to the boil, that's cool. What we want, if you watch this start to come rapidly to the boil, you'll see that the grease, the excess grease starts to come to the centre. What we can do then is as it comes, is just catch it and skim it from the surface. Such a shame you can't smell this, guys. Okay guys, we've got the bolognese has been cooking now for about 10 minutes. Probably needs about another 7 to 10 minutes. Again, bear in mind it's a quality meat. So, instead of adding the mushroom straight to that, what we do is just put a little bit of olive oil into a frying pan, which I've already started to use. And then we just check whether it's hot enough, just stick 1 or 2 in. As soon as you start to see the frying action, then toss the rest in. So what we'd have to do is A, softening the mushrooms, and B, just getting a bit of colour into them. Because if we put them in raw, then they just turn into a sponge and they have a negative appearance, and they're not sexy to eat, to be honest. So it's just a case of a little bit of oil, get a little bit of colour into them. Whilst that's cooking, we'll prep the herbs. Just rip the leaf from the stalk. The stalks tend to be a little bit chewy. So what we're actually really only wanting to use is the actual leaf itself. You gather it up into a bowl, and then just roughly chop it. A, this adds a really nice appearance, and B, the flavour of fresh herbs is absolutely second to none. See in here, the mushrooms are now starting to colour. If they start to dry out a little bit, excuse me, you can always add a tiny bit more oil. Bear in mind again, I'm using olive oil. If you wanted to, butter is just as good. The butter burns quicker. Thyme. Take your sprig and pull it backwards. Peeling the leaves off, that's all we want. Just strip the leaves backwards. Any bits of stalk that are left lying around, then take them out. This stuff's great if you can get it and just hang it in your kitchen, literally to dry out. And then another way of doing it, once it's dry, is to just crunch it like so between your hands and it falls in. Quickly chop that together, and that's ready to add to our dish. Mushrooms are now getting some brown on them. You can see there, they're all shiny now. So that means that the natural juices have started to come out and they're starting to caramelise or get a little bit of brown to them. When you get them to that stage, tip them straight in. Stir it all together. And at this stage, we just put in about 3/4 of the fresh herbs. Now, if you look in the pan now, you'll see that the level of the liquid has fallen below the level of the surface. So it's at this point now we can top up with some more wine. If you haven't got wine left for whatever reason, put some OXO cubes in there, a little bit of stock cube. Just bring it to the, so that the water, the liquid, is floating. See what I'm getting at? Now, I think there's about 5 more minutes of cookery left in that. So, now's the time to put our pasta on. How much pasta do people eat? Well, in the trade we work on approximately a centimetre. We work on approximately a centimetre across as being a portion. So, stand it in the middle and let it go. And we'll cook a few portions with here because I think we've got about 5 or 6 portions there, so we'll cook 3 or 4 here. For the camera crew, that is, guys. Just drop it straight into the centre. As this starts to wilt, it finds its own level. And what I've got missing from there now is salt. Pasta doesn't taste of anything unless it's seasoned. Season it well with salt. Smells awesome, I have to say. Then I would say that, wouldn't I? See how the pasta's sinking itself in? That should take about 5 minutes. We're kind of told now that fat is bad for you. In the trade, we work on the theory that fat is flavour. Oil, drinking olive oil, is not necessarily going to do you any favours. But it's a healthy product. You should never be using margarine, guys. Anything, think about it, anything you can get out of the fridge and spread straight away, it doesn't make sense to me. It's obviously chemically altered. If you use natural produce, butter, olive oil, fresh vegetables, should be pretty much in there for a healthy life. And salt, basically today, in this day and age, we're being told that salt is bad for us. Yes, it is, if you eat 7 bags of crisps a day. But salt is actually a flavour enhancer. And so what salt does is it draws out and enhances the flavour of the product you're cooking with. And if you really need proof of that, boil some potatoes with no salt and boil some potatoes with salt and see the difference. One tastes like a potato. I'll leave it up to you to tell me what the other one tastes like. Okay, if you look at this now, you'll see that the liquid has started to lower itself below the level of the meat again. If you look here, the meat is coming to the surface. At this point now, really, we can turn that down to virtually nothing. As far as I'm concerned, that's quite cooked. So we're just waiting on the pasta. The way to tell if pasta's cooked is literally to eat some. What you're looking for with pasta is what's called al dente, whereby the pasta should have a little bit of bite to it. Dente as in dentist. That's how I remember it. That's not cooked yet. Again, if you've got spaghetti, too much spaghetti, just put it in a bowl of water, stick it in the fridge. It's good for at least 3 or 4 days. Take another piece. I'll settle for that. Okay. Now it's up to you, as the person that's making this, as to how thick you want your bolognese. Personally, I prefer it full of meat with a little bit of sauce. See, I have to dig to find the sauce. The easiest way of finishing that, if you have too much sauce, not enough meat, then really all you're eating is spaghetti. So, what we do is, we actually finish it with a little bit of corn flour. Corn flour is a starch. So by adding a little bit of the water to the corn flour, stir it together. Pour it straight into the middle. That binds all the ingredients together. Time to eat, guys. So, get some of your spaghetti. Sauce. Finish it off with some of the herbs. Spaghetti bolognese. Right, acid test. I'm here with Kyle and Jake. Come and have some. Tell me the truth now. Bear in mind, Jake, Kyle says he doesn't eat much. That could be on the outside.